In the earlier service, you won't probably understand this if you weren't here, but Sean made a comment about my singing. And I need to interpret to you, I need to tell you what he was trying to say. He was trying to say that he really depends on me. He really depends on me. And that the worship, I know, isn't what it ought to be unless I'm here. That's what he was trying to say. And of course, if you're not singing with all you've got, and obviously you would hear me, probably. But if you're singing with all you've got, you probably don't hear me. So if you hear me, then you're not singing like you ought to. That's what he was trying to say. So I just thought I'd help you with it. Well, it's been a great time. I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 28. We are departing for just this morning from our normal study that we've been doing in Matthew chapter 5. This comes at a good time, I think, in relationship to all of that. And this week in the Cross Style Training Center and now conference, as we close the conference out today, I have been dealing with this Great Commission, which is given to us in Matthew 28, verse 20. Down through verse 16, down through verse 20. And I want to read it for you and with you. Then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee to the mountain which Jesus had appointed for them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Our request this morning, Jesus, would be that somehow that scene would take place here. And that wouldn't be a preacher trying to explain, but it would be you and your voice calling us, directing us, giving us the insight into the destiny of our lives. And the overwhelming awareness that you have called every single one of us, and that none of us are exempt this morning, and that you are wrapping your arms around us with great destiny and overwhelming purpose. And life is not without meaning. Life is not without purpose. We are not just filling time. Something bigger is going on than winning the ball game. There's something really taking place more than making an extra buck. This is really big stuff, and that you have drug us right in the middle of your heart, and the destiny you have for us is overwhelming. Put a thumb in our back today, O God. Roar in our bloodstream, flow through our bloodstream, roar in our bones. Make us alive unto you, that we might literally join you in the great heart that you have for our world. Please, oh Father, in your name I pray, amen. There's something really heavy about this particular passage, really heavy. And it isn't just in the words, and I know all Scripture is important, I get that, and all the verses matter. But some verses, some passages come to a peak. Some bring us to the top. Some are preparatory to move us to understanding others. And when you come to this passage, it's like you've arrived on the top of the mountain, like something has happened here that's just overwhelming in this passage. And one of the things that you get out of this whole passage is the climax idea. That this is the climax to the entire book of Matthew. In other words, everything he is writing has been moving to this point. You get that kind of feeling out of this. That he has been moving towards this eruption, and that these verses are some kind of an explosion at the end of the verse. They're the lava that's just spilling out everywhere. That's just a climax of everything that's been boiling within the life and ministry of Jesus. And so as you come to this climactic moment, here it's all laid out in a simplified way of where you fit in and what this is all about and what he's been wanting to do and what his purpose is in all of this after all. So this really becomes really, really significant. You realize that Jesus was locked down into a Jewish society. These disciples themselves had never been more than 100 miles away from their hometown in their lives. And all of a sudden, they are into a worldwide evangelism movement. And Jesus is laying the whole thing on them. And they're looking at one another saying, wow, all these other cultures and all this other stuff. And we've been so isolated. And Jesus had been that way himself, you understand. In Matthew chapter 10, he had said, don't go to anybody else. Just stay right here in Judaism and minister to Jews. This is the deal. And yet now it's exploding from that into a whole dynamic world. And again, he's dragging us in the middle of it. So here's this climactic idea as you come to this verse. So you come with some kind of excitement, like you're standing on the brink of something really, really big when you come to these verses. Another thing that you understand as you come into these verses is that there's something central here. That it's not just climactic and been boiling and it's now exploded all over you, but this is the heart of the matter. This is the central idea. This is, if you miss this, you've gone off on a tangent. That this is not one part, this is the whole deal. That this is not, well, yeah, some of you need to do that, but others won't. It isn't that kind of a deal. This is the throbbing heartbeat of everything that Jesus is all about. In other words, the visible God of Jesus, who has the invisible God that has been now visible through the heart and life of Jesus, is now being exploded in our face, people. So if you want to know what God's heart is and what he's all about and where he's going and how he feels about all nations and how he feels about your next door neighbor and what he's into, you come to these verses, because here's the passion of God himself for his world. And now if I'm going to join him in his heart, think of what that's going to mean, that I'm going to be involved in something bigger than myself. Don't you want that? The mundane, the get up in the morning, go to work, come home, eat some supper, watch TV, go to bed, get up in the morning, go to work, come home. Doesn't that, no, I want to retire. Get me out of this. See, that isn't in this passage. You can't come up with that. There's this whole heart of God that's just throbbing with passion. And it's seen all the way through the life of Jesus, but really becomes clear in this Great Commission. And of course, involved in that as well is not only this climactic thing that's exploding as you see it in the passage, and it's so central to the heart of God, but obviously there's the call to the church. And I hate to say, maybe I shouldn't even say the church. A call to the church, because immediately we shove it off because the church has never been what it ought to be. I get that. And the church was fine until you came. I don't know what happened then. But you messed us up. So, and the church is made up of people. I get that. And the church has never done and never will. What I don't know. Just get off that subject. Maybe this is all about you and him. Maybe this is a call of God, not to the church, but to you. Maybe this is eyeball to eyeball, nose to nose, in your face. And the mission statement that, of course, spills out of this as you move into the book of Acts is the Acts 1:8 thing, which you and I have all memorized. And you shall receive power. That was the promise, folks. You shall receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you. You shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the utter ends of the world. And it's all laid out for us, the mission statement of who we really are. If you're going to give your life to something, here's something that is worth it, because it's his heart. Now, the heart of the matter seems to be down in verse 18, 19. He begins, of course, with this idea of authority in verse 18. All authority has been given to me, and that reassures us, obviously, because there's lavish, extravagant, no problem. Well, where are we going to get the resource? Hey, no problem. Are we ever going to have? Yeah, you got plenty. Hey, wildly give it out. That's the kind of resource we got on our hands. Well, how much love should I extend? Well, you've got so much. The resource of the love is just go for it. Just waste it. Can you see coming up to a Jesus on a cross and say, now, conserve your love. You may run out. But see, the resource is the forgiveness thing is how many times can I forgive? There's just so much forgiveness that it can't be exhausted. It's just, that's the kind of deal we're into with the resource. And based upon that whole kind of resource deal, he moves into this key verse. And it's verse 19. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things. Now, what I really want to zero in is, number one, the command. In all of these verbs, it's really interesting. Out of all the verbs that are given in that verse 19, go, a verb. Make disciples, a verb. Baptize, a verb. Teach, in verse 20, a verb. 4 verbs, 4 key verbs that he gives. Only one of them is an imperative. That's a command. So ringing through this whole commission is the undercurrent of this phenomenal, overwhelming command. And, of course, on one of the nights, we talked about the fact that the go is not a command, which I think is hilarious and very relaxing. Because you don't have to go. Woo! I think that's great. You don't have to go. Well, I don't want to go. It's okay. You don't have to go. Don't worry about it. Well, I'm not going. That's fine. Stay home. It's okay. There's no pressure here. Nobody's putting a squeeze on you. This is not a thumb in the back. This is not a gun in the back. This is not a pressure. This is not, you come, we'll whip you, we'll get you, we'll motivate you, we'll get you in line. This is not, none of that's here. Hey, you don't want to go? It's all right. See, when going is a command, and when you approach this verse and say, oh, I got to go. I gotta go. I go to my world. I gotta do that. And it becomes a duty. Then immediately I begin. You know how I am. I begin to connive. How can I go without going? Well, I could send. I don't want to go to Africa. I don't want to go to India. In fact, I've quit. I've gone. I'm not going anymore. I'm done. I'm not going. I'm not going to go. But I could send somebody in my place. Woo! So I'll give $50 for their trip. Yay! That way I've gone by proxy. And I fulfill the command. See, I begin to the connive thing. After all, that's what we paid the preacher for. What does he do all day? So, see, I get out of that. When the go is the command, then I wiggle myself out of that one and justify and feel good about it. But, hey, you don't need to do that. So all the gymnastics I just walked through, you just dump all that because there's no need for you to do that because you don't have to go. Just sit there. It's okay. No pressure. Relax. No duty. No obligation. Because that's not the command. See, the go thing, as you'll remember, is an assumption. It's assumed you're going to go. In fact, probably it's in the aorist tense, which normally is translated into the past, which would have the idea of after you have gone. It's assumed you're going to go. It's assumed that deep in your heart is is this driving passion. It's assumed that you've got this, that your blood is boiling. It's assumed that you've got this thing going on in your heart and mind that is plotting and planning and saying, oh, how am I going to get him? It's assumed that. And it's assumed that if you don't have that, probably you got a spiritual problem. Probably things aren't right between you and Jesus. Probably you're not where you ought to be spiritually. Probably you're in danger. Probably you've got one foot on a banana peel. Probably you're in trouble and you need revival. Probably you ought to get in on every service and see what you can do about it. Probably. And it's assumed. Jeremiah touched on this, but several years ago I got off on this kick of the shock thing. I decided, wouldn't it be phenomenal if we just, instead of accepting, well, that's the way it is, well, they're just that way, we were shocked. Everything that isn't Christian just shocks us. You haven't won anybody to Jesus? What? You're kidding me. Whoa, are you sick? What happened? You're not evangelizing? What? You got to be kidding me. What happened to you? Hey, did you get your legs cut off? What's the problem here? And just be shocked. See, that's the passage. The passage is just, it's shocking. You haven't got your sleeves rolled up. You're not pouring your life out. You're not investing. You're not going after. You're not conniving. You don't like that word. That's probably a negative word. But you're not plotting and planning. How am I going to get them? You don't go down to your job and look at people and say, oh, I'm after you. You don't do that. What are you talking about? What? Whoa, what's wrong with you? You're sick. Hey, you better go to the doctor. It's that kind of a deal. Now, so the compulsion is all assumed in the passage. So there's no command, so you don't have to go. Well, if that's not the command, what's the command? The command is make disciples. Make disciples. And the whole make disciples is the idea of, see, the picture is, as we said the other day, I got my hat on my head, I got my coat on my back, man, and I'm headed out the door, brother. Here I go. I'm running out the door. I gotta go. I'm on my way. Here I come. What am I going to do? Make disciples. And the make disciples is the kind of instruction for the guy who he's burning in his bones and he doesn't know what to do. So Jesus says, let me give you some instructions. Listen to me while you're running out the door. Make disciples. Now, when you really begin to get into the idea of make disciples, it's not put on programs. Have more Sunday school classes. Add more services. See, there's none of that in get a building down by the interstate. See, it isn't any of that kind of stuff. This is all about make disciples. This is not about do well so you can have a report at the district assembly. See, that's not in the picture. This is not about go and work in witness teams. That's not this. This is not give more money, although that's good. But that's not what he's talking about. See, this is make disciples. That the burning passion. How can I put this into your thinking until it becomes paramount? Make disciples. Make disciples. Make disciples. That every committee meeting, every board meeting, every time we get together, Saturday night service, Sunday morning, school of practical ministry, backpack, everything is for what? Make disciples. Make disciples. Make disciples. And we've said this kind of stuff to you before, but see, I don't care whether the homeless eat or not. Well, why do we go to all this trouble to have meals? Make disciples! Backpack kids, I mean, yeah, I don't care whether they have food to take home with them or not. What do you care about? Make disciples! See, the focus is not on the food. Does that upset you? You can get so wrapped up in the food. Let's make disciples. The deal is not we want to help you get a job. I don't care whether you work or not. I want to make you a disciple. Because if you become a disciple, your whole life you'll get a job. See, let's make disciples. This is the deal. Are you getting this? Let's take that and put it into the family. What are you after in your family? Make disciples! What are you interested in your kids? Make disciples! What's the primary thing about your kid? Make disciples! What are you going to spend all your time doing with your... Make disciples! See, it isn't about my kid being a star in Little League. It's make disciples! Make disciples. He's got to be a disciple. Well, I grew up with crooked teeth. My kid is not going to have crooked teeth. I don't care about that. It's okay, but that's not the big... Make disciple. Your kid has to be a disciple. See, your primary, overwhelming, driving focus for your kids, they got to be disciples. They got to be disciples. That's what he says. Well, grades are... So you sacrifice his spiritual life for grades. Then you don't know these verses. Because these verses are, everything is secondary to make disciples. Make disciples. Translate this into what upsets you. What bothers you? Well, they turn that stinking air conditioner so high, it just freezes me to death. Make disciples! If you're going to gripe about something, let it be about... We're not making enough disciples! Make disciples! Don't talk about the weather, talk about making a disciple. If you're going to shed one tear, let it be over this business of making disciples. This is what you cry about. This is what you get mad about. This is what you get upset about. This is what boils your bones. This is what stirs you up. This is what drives you. This is the whole. My life is in turmoil over what? Not job, not finances, it's all about, disciples, disciples, disciples. We got to make disciples. Can you imagine a church having a $200,000 budget? In a year, they spend $200,000. And at the end of the year, you come and say, well, what did they spend this on? And how many disciples were made? No disciples, and we spent $200,000. Well, what'd you spend it on? Well, we had a real good concert. And, hey, you should see our sanctuary remodeled. So you spent $200,000 on yourself. And never made disciples. This is the deal. Now, I'm not against spending money on concerts. Hey, whatever. I don't care. As long as make disciples. Make disciples. Do you see the priority of this in the passage. It's make disciples, make disciples, make disciples. Every tear you shed, let it be over disciples, disciples, disciples. All your energy, disciples. Everything you do, disciples, disciples. See, do you come home after a whole day and just flop on the couch and say, oh, I'm so tired from making disciples, I can't hardly stand it. Well, yes, you should. Why? Because that's all you're supposed to do. That everything you do, every bit of your energy, all the outspill of your being, your schedule revolves around and is infiltrated with what? Make disciples, make disciples, make disciples, make disciples. So if I were to say to you, what is the number one priority in the mind of Christ? Would you say it is? Whoa. Probably so. Probably so. Make disciples. Now, that's the command. Now, in this make disciples, there is a combination. Because immediately the question is, well, if I got to make disciples, oh my, how do I make disciples? And when finally one shows up, what are they like? What is a disciple? So someplace in all of this, you've got to come to some kind of content of what a disciple really is. And this was a little confusing to me, and I don't know that I can adequately explain it to you, and you may have to research it on your own and come to your own conclusions. But the Greek word given to us for disciples here doesn't really say disciples. In other words, if I get what happened is we looked at this word, which is only used, by the way, 4 times in the New Testament. We looked at this word and said, whoa, we don't have anything to match that. We don't have an English word that matches that one. So we just took this disciple idea and stuck it in there because it's the closest we could come up with of what this word is all about. Because you see, there's 2 ideas that are intimately joined together, connected, combined in this disciple idea. So if there's two ideas, this idea and this idea, and when they're combined together, they become the idea of disciple in the passage. Now, the reason that's so important, I think, is that these 2 ideas have to be joined, or you're not a disciple. In other words, you can't say, well, it's 2 ideas, and I got this one down. Therefore, I'm half a disciple. No, you're not. No, you're not. Well, no, I don't have that half, but I do have this half. I got this one. No, I'm half a disciple. No, you're not. You're not. You're not a disciple at all. To be a disciple, you have to have both of these things united together, working in tandem. They have to come together if you're going to be a disciple. And you can't be half a disciple. Well, I'm partially a disciple. I'm almost a disciple. Or I'm borderline disciple. No, you either have them or you don't. And they are combined or they're not. And you can't be half. That's the concept, I think, of the word itself. So the idea is all wrapped up in the intimacy and the combining together. And that's not hard. You know, the water thing. Hydrogen, oxygen. When they come together, you got water. Well, I got oxygen. Well, yeah. But that's not half water. It's in the combination that you got water. So we understand that. So that's what's going on in the passage here. Now, if that's true, then what are the 2 things that have to be combined? And this is not complicated. One absolute element of the disciple deal that's in this word and in this passage is believe. A believer. You got to be a believer. Well, I'm a disciple. Oh, good. I believe in Buddha. Well, okay, that's fine. Good for you. But you're not a disciple in this verse. To be a disciple in this verse, you got to believe in Jesus. Jesus is paramount in the disciple of this verse. And it's a belief in Jesus. And in the past, we've gone over this a lot, and I tried to brainwash you on this, and I think we did fairly well on that, but we probably need a refresher. So this is an attempt to brainwash you, so that every time you think about faith or you think about believe, you automatically think this phrase: invoking the activity of the second party, which is believe. In other words, we're not talking about, oh, yeah, well, I'm willing to believe the Bible. We're not talking that. We're not talking about, oh, yeah, well, there's the creed. Jesus died. Hey, rose from the dead, ascended to the right hand of the Father. God bless America. That's not it. That's not what we're dealing with here. We're talking about belief, which means I'm going to consistently, in every activity of my life, I'm going to invoke the activity of the second party. Now, the fact that there's a second party and the fact that I'm indicating Jesus is the second party is a little degrading, because he really ought to be the first party. You're exactly right on that. But see, he's never been the first party in my life. He's always been the second party. Why? Because I've always been stuck on myself. See, I've been the first party. I've always invoked my activity. See, you've created a mess, and I always step in, push you aside, and said, I'll handle it. See, rather than turn it over to you, I'll just do it myself. I'll just get it done, because I know how to do this. See, I've always been the first party, and all of my activities have always invoked me. See, I didn't call on you to get out of bed. I called on me, and I'll get out of bed, and I'll get the job done, and I'll go out, and I will, and I've always been the first party. Now, I am going to be broken of the first party. This first party thing is going to be set aside. In biblical terms, it's going to be crucified. I'm going to die to myself, man. I'm giving up the first party thing. Why? Because after about 90 years of this, I look back and say, whoa, what a mess I've created. And the first party deal didn't work out too well. Because life is bigger than I am. And it isn't that I didn't try, or it isn't even that I'm bad. It's the fact that there are too many variables that I can't handle, that I'm not adequate for. And I'm a good guy, and I do my best, and but all my life I've done my best, and it's never turned out right. I don't know what to do with that. And that has become very, very vivid to me in jail ministry. Because you can look at the guys and say, hey, you've done your best. Yeah. You tried real hard. Yeah. You gave it the college try. Yeah. Well, how'd it turn out for you? Well, you probably didn't end up in jail. Well, that's fine. But you should have been. No amens on that except one. I appreciate that. Yeah, because life is, you've made a mess too. So don't go around and look like you've been successful in invoking the activity of the first party. So this is a death to the first party, that somehow, some way, the second party, who is Jesus, might interact in my life, which has been the theme all week, people. So the essence, one of the elements of this whole business of disciple as found in, that we are going to get people into such an intimate relationship with Jesus. We are our goal, our drive, what boils in our bones, what drives us in our system, the one thing we got to get done is we got to get you intimate with Jesus so that you rely on him instead of yourself. So we're just hanging around all the time. We just hover over you all the time, waiting for you to mess up. So we can move in and say, oh, I know somebody who's bigger than you are. We want to make you a disciple. Now, a second element that's in the disciple idea is the learner idea or the seeker idea. Well, I'm a seeker. Well, that doesn't make you a disciple. Because again, you could seek Buddha, you could seek whatever. So it isn't being a seeker. Well, I believe in Jesus, and I call on him every now and then, that doesn't make you a disciple. But when you put these two together, and your whole life is constantly invoking the activity of the second party, and you are constantly seeking him, sitting on the edge of your seat, when you're constantly doing that, then, oh, you're a disciple. Well, I'm a messy disciple. That's okay. You're still a disciple, because some disciples are real messes. But that's still okay. But you're seeking and you're invoking his activity. Well, I don't do everything right as a disciple. That's still okay. Because it's not about doing everything right. It's about, oh, I'm invoking his activity and I'm seeking with my whole heart and in the seeking and hungering. So it isn't something you do, and that's been very plain this week. See, eating is an activity. But the reason I eat is I'm hungry. And that's not an activity. That's an inside thing that drives me, man. So we're not talking about the eating. We're talking about the hunger. And see, when you eat, when you're not hungry, you get fat. So what's happened is we've developed a whole bunch of people who say, I'm a disciple, I'm eating, but you're not hungry, and all you have is biblical fat. That was awful, wasn't it? But see, when you're hungry and you only eat until hunger is satisfied, you don't get fat. The problem is I overeat. That's my problem. Why? I eat when I'm not hungry, and I don't stop when my hunger is satisfied. What would happen if you hungered and thirst for Jesus? Oh, I'm satisfied. No, I'm not. I'm not satisfied. I'm still hungry. Well, eat some more. Are you satisfied? No. Eat some more. Are you satisfied? No. So you never get fat. Because your hunger just increases as you consume. Isn't that an amazing thing? And we went through that in the Matthew 5 thing, Beatitudes. But that's the whole dynamic of the passage is, I'm a disciple. Why? Because I'm invoking his activity. I'm dying to myself. I'm dead to myself. And I've opened up my life to his activity. And I'm hungering and thirsting for him to move in my life. And whatever that means and all the correction that's involved in that. And however that shapes itself out. And I have become a disciple. Well, I'm a Christian. I'm just not a disciple. I'm water, but I'm not wet. I don't think so. I don't think so. See, this is a key passage here. This is a key passage. So I'm suggesting to you that in the passage then, that there's one thing going on. It's make disciples. That's the command. Make disciples. That's what we're about. Make disciples. That's the only thing. Make disciples. All of our energy. Make disciples. We spending all our money on make disciples. Oh, hey, we're wearing ourselves. Make disciples. That's the whole deal. There isn't anything else. And anything else is, we're not interested. Don't have time for it. So the whole focus is make disciples. And what are we making? Oh, we are after people, invoking the activity of the second party, realizing the mess of their own existence and their own self-centeredness, and literally investing, literally opening up to, literally broken of themselves, and literally inviting him to engage in their lives and begin to spill through them, and they're seeking and open and responsive to this activity of Jesus in their living. And they are a disciple. Now, there's a problem, a complication. The command, I get that, make disciples. And the combination, the two coming together, I get that. But there's a complication, which really, I don't know what to do with it. But when I got into this, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations. The go is passive. Passive voice, which means the subject is not responsible for it. the subject is being acted upon. So, I'm not responsible for going. The reason I'm going is something has picked me up by the nape of the neck and it's just shoved me out the door. I'm motivated. Something inside of me is burning in within me. I'm just driven. I'm driven. And I'm not responsible for the drive. I didn't create the drive. I would do what Jeremiah does. But I can't do that, so I don't know what that is like. So anyhow, I don't pump myself up. I can't pull that off. So I'm motivated. I'm motivated. I get that in the go. But when you come to make disciples, it's in the active voice, meaning I'm responsible for it. And that bothered me, and it still bothers me. The whole idea of I'm responsible for making disciples. Because the minute you put the responsibility on me, I say, listen, we got to get a video series yet, bud. And could we have a Saturday seminar on making disciples? And do you have a class on it? And what's the best book out on it? And could I, and see, because I got to do it. And when you come to my discipleship class and you've graduated from my class, I'll give you a button. And that way I know how many disciples I've made. Woo! Don't lose your button. See, it bespeaks all of that kind of stuff. And that's so anti everything that's come through the book of Matthew in this and the whole disciple idea itself. That, hey, I'm not invoking the activity of the first party. I'm not responsible for this. When I've been responsible for this, I messed it up. So if you're going to put making disciples into my hands, I'm going to mess it up. Because immediately I would have you all wearing your belt on the side. Come on, get with the program. What's the problem? And all disciples, we'd be able to spot them. Belts on the side? Yep. So you can't put this in my hands, and I cannot be responsible for the making disciples because I will mess it up every time. So what is going on in the passage if I'm responsible? Well, here's where I came to. This word is only used 4 times in the New Testament. So I went to the other 3. And do you know that all the other 3 times, it's really intriguing, it isn't translated make disciples. It has the idea of becoming one. And all the other 3 times. Let me just give you one example because it isn't far. It's just, hey, it's right on your page probably, at least it's in mine. In Matthew 27. Yeah, Matthew chapter 27. Look at verse 57. In verse 57, it says, "Now when evening had come, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had also become a disciple." So every time this word, only used 4 times, every time it's used, 3 of those are translated, always translated, become a disciple, or it has the idea of becoming a disciple. So it's not the idea of making a disciple that I'm responsible for making, but it's the idea that I'm going to be a disciple. That's the emphasis. Then we come here and it shows up and we translate it make. Now I don't want to say I'm smarter than everybody else or anything like that, so I don't know. But it just appeared to me that if we did that in the other 3, why couldn't we do that here? And do you know what that would do to the passage? If your responsibility was not to make disciples, if your sole responsibility was to be one, wow. So if what he's yelling and screaming about is, as you go out the door, make disciples, I want to see 15 of them next week. If he's not saying that, if he's saying, hey, be a disciple, you're headed to all nations, be one man out there, be a disciple, be a disciple, be a disciple. Well then, if I'm not responsible for making them, if I'm responsible for being one, how would any disciples be made? Disciples are not made because you make them disciples. Disciples are made because you're being one and they like it so much they want to get in on it. That's why we have the School of Practical Ministry. Because we want to drag you in here and have you be here for at least a year so that the people around here, this congregation, the staff, the leaders, will be disciples. They won't teach you how to do expositional preaching. They will just live in the Word, saturate in the Word. They won't teach you how to do it. They will just saturate in the Word, and you'll just get so hungry for it, you'll pick it up. Because the honest truth is, we don't know how to teach it. We don't. We stumble around. We're the awfulest teachers you've ever heard. We don't know how to do it. But hopefully in some of this, we'll just be this and you'll catch. That's how I got it. I saw it. And I said, I got to have it. And it wasn't an it was him. I know that. But this is the older deal. Yeah, that's the older deal. What's the big deal about the altar? There is no big deal about the altar. Do you know that Jesus never had an altar call? John Wesley never had an altar call. Back in the 1750s, never had an altar call. What he would do, he would preach until people would fall over. Boy, I've thought about that one. And then they'd pray him through and he'd preach some more. Wasn't about some altar. Altar calls are recent, people, and it's become our tradition. So the deal is not altars. Nobody gives a rip about the altar. Come on. It's not a big deal. The altar isn't a big deal. Oh, maybe it is a big deal. Maybe the reason it's a big deal because God moves upon you and you sit there and won't respond to him. And yet you pray for the guy next door to you who really needs it, and you want him to come to an altar. You want him to repent. You want him to be right. You want him to respond, but you don't respond. Therefore, you are not the spiritual leader of being a disciple in his life, so he knows what to do. See, I just got saved last night. Whoa. And I'm coming to church for the first time in my life. I don't know how to act. I've never been to church. And even then, you know, churches are so, whoa. Different churches are, whoa. And I know ours is really strange. Because I know you. So it's really strange. But anyway, yeah, so how do you act here? What's the proper way of acting in church? Well, how am I going to know? Going to watch you. You get up during the service and walk out 5 times. Whoa, that's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. What would happen if everybody in this service sang exactly like you? Whoa. It'd be kind of dead for some of us. You're a spiritual leader. You're a being disciple deal. Well, I want my kids to be really in the gospel. I want them to really be. I want them to get. I want them. Hey, they're not going to. Why? Because you don't. They're going to be less than you are. So, frankly, that's why I sit right there or right there. That's why I sing at the top of my lungs. That's why, hey, I'm an introvert, people. My natural tendency is, hey, let's shut this thing down and go home. And I hope I don't have to see you till next week. But I have decided I'm a spiritual leader, and I want this church to be like I am. And I want to be passionate for Jesus. And I'm going to show you how. And I'm going to sing with my hands in the air. And I'm going to sing at the top of my lungs. In spite of Sean. I'm going to sing at the top of my lungs. Because I want you to. And you're doing that in your family. You're doing that for your kids. You're doing that for our church. Being a disciple. And isn't it interesting? You're kneeling in an altar of prayer, crying out to Jesus because he spoke to your heart on some issue. And you're kneeling there saying, oh, Lord, oh, Lord. And you look at it, somebody bumps you because they knelt, and finally you look out of the corner of your eye and you see them. What are you doing down here? I didn't talk to you. I didn't witness to you. I didn't. They saw you. And you were being. And they wanted in on it. Jesus. I got to be, Lord. And Lord, I am shaping my personal world. My kids are learning how to handle the problems of their life because they see me handling the problems of my life. My grandkids are learning what it means to love Jesus because they're seeing me love you. My neighbors, my people in my community, they're learning what it is to have a priority for Christ. Because I'm being a disciple. I'm invoking your activity, oh God. I've lived out of myself long enough. I've had the taint of the selfish self-centeredness operating in my life too long. And in the name of Jesus, would you bring that to death? And would you flow your life into me? I'm invoking your activity today in my behalf. Act in my behalf, oh God. And the interesting thing, Jesus, is I don't have to even ask you to do it because you already did it. It was a cross 2,000 years ago and it's all done. And I just want to waller in it. I want to soak in it. I want to saturate in it. I want to soak in all that you're doing in my life. And I'm just seeking you and hungering. And I want you to strip off of me all the biblical fat. Because I've accumulated all this information and all this churchy stuff. And I'm waddling around 200 pounds overweight with all of this biblical fat worn out trying to win my world. Would you just strip me down. Just let me hunger for you until I only eat when I'm hungry. And in the hunger for you, it just lean muscle. I become lean and mean. Full of the Spirit of God, flowing life. And my world has changed. God, I got to have this for my family. And I got to have this for my wife. You know, Lord, I'm trying to straighten that woman out. And you know, Lord, she's tried to straighten me out. And neither one of us got very far. And when both of us let you come and straighten, when I let you come and straighten me out, and she let you come and straighten her out, somehow we both got straight. We're seeking today. Heads are bowed. There's a call. You're on the hook, friend. The command is not to go. You don't have to go. But if you're not going, what's your problem? You sick? You're not giving all your energy to making disciples? What's the problem here? You're not giving all your energy to being a disciple? What's the problem here? Would you be a disciple so you could make them? For your sake, for the sake of your kids, for the sake of your grandkids, for the sake of the community. It's a call. Want to respond?